Hey, friends and family, welcome to You, Me, and the Trinity's Christ Connections and Conversations. We have a conversation that's probably going to be, as I like to say, hot as fish grease tonight. I am your sister, your friend, your cousin, your auntie, Coach Ebony Lachelle, and we have two regulars back to join us tonight. We got Micah and Zoxa Claret. She said put some respect on her name. Put some respect on it. So y'all tonight we are discussing righteous to ratchet, holy to hood. The duality of today's Christian. Is there a gray area? So we're gonna go and jump in it because I'm tired. I know y'all tired and we got things to do. Um so I mean like what do you think about that? Is there duality? Are we just trying to make excuses or justify what it is we really want to do? What's his name? Jonathan McReynolds had a song called No Gray. So can you do both?
Who do you want to go first?
I don't care. This will be a free for all. Just go for it. Can you do both? Should you do both?
So I don't know about the question of should you do both. Like I just know about do you. And what I mean is when I first established, like for real, established my relationship with Christ, the first thing I did was, how Columbia House, when we ordered all those CDs back in the day. So the first thing I did, and I had a massive collection. Like I had so many CDs, and still to this day, I owe those people for those CDs. But I had this massive collection of CDs. And of course, before Christ, I started every day, on Master P, Triple C, Gangsta Boo Nim. That's how I started my day in order to hit the dope track to do what I did, right? So once I really established my relationship with Jesus Christ, going to the church or whatever, it's all about get rid of all that stuff, put all this stuff on. Yep. So y'all, I threw away all of my CDs, right? Oh, Lord. And I'm like, I'm only gonna listen to gospel music because in my mind, based on how I was taught, you don't listen to secular music. You don't go to a nightclub. You don't use profanity. You don't do any of this stuff, right? And I'm not saying that, I'm in alignment with this stuff, but during that time, I was so ignorant to how God and the Spirit actually works. So I had to grow and evolve and understand that God already knows what's in my heart. He already knows me for who I am. And his biggest concern is my heart. His biggest concern is my love that I hold for him and desires that I hold, or shouldn't hold if I am truly loving him. Honestly, during that period, I needed to do away with all of the music, right? And I needed to do away with it in order to establish my foundation in him. So it would have possibly been a distraction or whatever. So I did away with all of that just to establish my foundation. Once I was no longer a babe in Christ, I was able to start back listening to, the R&B music, without picking the phone up, calling somebody saying, what's up? I was able to listen to it and understand that this is simply music, and music cannot control me, although it can influence you, but it should not control you. And I have to have self-control for myself. So in essence, this is a culmination of who I am. I am the same person. I will listen to some trap music while I work out. When I hit the highway, I listen to trap music, but I also will start my day in worship. And guess what? God is still pleased with me because I'm not desiring to, listen to the Master P and all this stuff and just not doing it like a lot of other people who really want to do this stuff, or they are doing it and they're keeping it hush hush behind closed doors. And so a lot of times people are hurt in the church when they see that the people they put on these pedestals, the same people who tell them they going to hell for listening to certain music, they going to hell for going to the club, when they actually see these same people in the places and doing these things, it's like, oh my God, now they're hurt in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my take on. Like, I don't believe in can you do this or can you do that. I feel like you should know who you are and you should definitely be who you are. And if there's anything that you need to be delivered from, you should make your petition known to Christ and allow him to do the work.
Michael.
So I'll chime in and make a couple different points, right? So we can look at Bible, and then we can look at, I guess, for lack of a better word, I'll say reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes how we execute our beliefs is different than um, reality, or sometimes our belief are different from how we really execute our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just say this. I'll start by saying how I believe in Romans, I think it's chapter 6, somewhere in there, Paul says, ye who have been saved have died to sin. And so if we kind of sort of apply it to the topic, a traditional or a more conservative belief might be that there is no gray area, that it's either one or the other. The other thing that I'd say is that we need to identify words. Did I lose? There we go. We need to identify what we're truly saying by ratchet and hood. And the reason why I say that is because I think that everybody has a different understanding of the two. Sometimes they are not the same. So when I think ratchet, I don't necessarily think who live in these parameters of clubbing and things like that. That's not necessarily ratchetness to me. Um, but what I will say is this: I think that there is a duality, and it's not necessarily in the sense that it's two people or that you are code switching, for lack of a better word. It's just that there are some characteristics about you that, even though you are saved, even though you know who Christ is, you still have the nature of who you were before your salvation. It is still a part of you. Now, granted, as also in Philippians, he says, we strive towards the mark of the high call. We are trying to get there. So there are parts of me, even though I have ordination, even though I've pastored, even though every now and then I put on a robe and a stole and say, hey, listen, I'm reverend. There are parts of me who still identify with Micah. There are parts of me who still identify with the fact that I grew up on the west side of Birmingham and I wish would. And I tell people all the time that there are parts of me that I've tried to, for lack of a better word, suppress or allow God to work through certain situations for me, because if I handled them, I would probably be in prison. And that's just the reality of that's just the reality of it for me. The other thing that I'll say, and as it relates to this topic, some things that we have labeled as ratchet and or hood are not. Um, Listen, y'all saw the promotional video.
Michael, where your picture at?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I don't know if do you still have it? Can you screen share?
I
I was
mean,
just about to bring that up. I'm gonna find it I'm gonna cut the camera off in just a second when I get done, and I'm gonna try to go find it, and then we'll come back to that. But what I was just about to bring that up, and I was gonna say, For example, a prime example would be golds, or as people call them, grills. They have been identified or has been labeled as hood. They have been identified or labeled as possibly ratchet. But the reality of it is every now and then I like to put in my grill and I'll take my little pictures and because the truth of the matter is whether I got on the suit and me whether I got on a suit and tie with my slugs or not, I'm still gonna be who God called me to be. I'm still gonna be reverend, even though I don't really use titles, but I'm still going to be that guy. I'm still going to be who God called me to be. Those gold teeth don't make me any less called than not wearing them. Um, people, I joke all the time about how we often try to make it seem like preachers and pastors and ministry workers and people who are just genuinely saved don't don't have that nature in them. And a prime example, my brother preached this sermon, and it was about when Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And then the truth of the matter is, no, even though his name was changed, nobody ever in Bible refers to him as Israel. God changed his name, but nobody ever refers to him as Israel, even after his name is changed. And one of the things that he brought out is because there are parts of us that we still identify with as Jacob. We may have become Christian. We may be saved now. He may have put his hands on us. He may have called us into a purpose. But the reality of it is that there are still parts of us that identify with the nature of who we were before he touched our lives, who we were before he changed us. And every now and then, unfortunately for some, it comes out. And that's just all I got to say.
Uh, Tim, did you catch the question?
Give it to me one more time.
Just
With
old
your late,
Baptist preacher just showing
with
up
your
late.
late self.
Just ugh.
Listen, I was doing
You can even see the young. I mean, he ain't got no lights on.
He,
I got two lights
he
on.
breaking the rules because he in the car.
I
Well,
mean,
I was
footsteps in the
I,
dark.
I was doing a catering that was supposed to start at one time, but of course they started at a time that was more convenient for them.
My
And
Lord,
so,
Ratchet.
right,
The kiddo. Well, you know what? Get your coins because this volunteer work. So, um, and y'all know I love y'all. But so the question we're really discussing the gray area. Is there a gray area? Are Christians allowed, is it acceptable for them to feel have a duality in being holy and hood? Or can you be righteous and ratchet?
I would have to say yes, you can. And I'm not saying that because I am that, but I'm
Well, what you're saying is for then, preacher.
but I'm saying it because you know in the in the course of the week, as I kind of pondered on the topic, one of the things that came to mind, and I want to touch on a couple of things actually, and especially from a preacher's perspective. One of the reasons why it's hard for some people to accept the hood and holy or the righteous and ratchet is because, unfortunately, in the church world, most of us, and I've been guilty at one point in time in my life of feeling like we have to be a carbon copy of another person, or
Mm.
Mm.
that we have to be everybody else's definition of a preacher or whatever the case may be. When the truth is, God gave all of us our different personalities for a reason. And those personalities is actually what helps us to effectively do ministry. All of us are not called to reach the same people. And sometimes the hood aspect of you or the ratchet aspect of you just might be the identity that God is using in you to reach the people that come from where you came from. But if you're trying to be everybody else's definition of a preacher or a carbon copy of another preacher, then you make it difficult for you to effectively be who God called you to be. Now, yes, we are to be changed, which means that I can't go around cussing everybody out and ready to fight like I used to be back in the day. But the flip side to that is I don't
Oh, you gone.
Yeah, he on that cricket device.
Oh my goodness. Huh? We can't hear you.
Is he muted?
He's not muted. He just a talking too. You hear?
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. He was just a talking too. So kind of talking about what he said about we're expected to be carbon. We see you waving, we see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. Um, Carbon copies. Do you think that has hindered the growth of the kingdom somewhat?
Yes. And I say that because me and Tim, we've had this conversation so many times. I'm not going to drop any names or anything, but there's like countless preachers
Mm-hmm.
who literally mimic this one particular preacher. Like there's no identity, no separation. It's basically like if you weren't looking, you wouldn't even know that that wasn't that preacher that they're
Mm-hmm.
mimicking that's up there talking. From the way they read their scriptures, their style of scripture, and everything is just based off of what this one particular person does. And I've always landed on they're literally missing out on God being able to develop them. And
Uh-huh.
that's simply because they're too busy trying to be somebody else. To the point where God can't even stir up a gift on the inside of them. Matter of fact, we don't even really know who they are as a vessel of God, because everything that they go to do, they're mimicking this other particular person. And it's like, it's so sad, there's no originality. And as Tim mentioned, we are not destined to be a carbon copy. I know me as a preacher, a lot of people cannot stomach me. And then you have a lot who can, because one thing about it is I'm going to be real. Like, I'm not trying to fit into this traditional box of wearing a certain color on the first Sunday, preaching a certain sermon on this particular day. Like, I believe in being fully used by God. I believe in being 100% real. I've had people to try to silence me in regards to my testimony. I've had people to try to tell me, well, you should leave this part out. You shouldn't say this because then people will think X, Y, Z. And I don't care what people think. And I concluded that years ago. My testimony is my testimony. That's how I've arrived at the place where I've arrived at. That's why I've arrived at a place of choosing spirituality, or shall I say, relationship over religion. You'll hear me say that time and time again, because it's not about tradition. It's not about religious beliefs and what people do on Sunday mornings and how people feel like as a woman I should carry myself if I am a preacher. Granted, I know how to have etiquette and carry myself because God is the relationship that I have with him. That's who leads me and guide me. But in regards to like trying to mimic other like female women vessels and stuff like that, nah, that's not me. And that'll never be me. Like, I'm not going to fit into that box or that narrative, and it's okay.
Michael.
I, I'll say this. Um, it's dangerous, very much dangerous to allow yourself to try to mimic somebody else. Um, and it's really, in my opinion, it's something wrong with somebody who wants to be like somebody else. It's a mental thing, really. But it's so common. Um, it's so very common, and I wonder why sometimes. But this is what I'll say. When I first started in ministry, Friday this past Friday celebrated 10 years in ministry. And when I first started in ministry, I would wear the black suit and the white shirt. I went and bought me a big old cross so I could stick it in my pocket. And at that time, I was 19 years old. Um, I wore my socks and, all kinds of stuff because for whatever reason, I felt like that's what a preacher looked like.
Mm.
Then somewhere, I decided, you know what? That ain't what a preacher has to look like. That's not what a preacher has to look like. So now, y'all heard me say a little bit earlier that when I choose to wear a robe and when I choose to wear the stole and all of those things, because most times when you see me, you're going to see me in some faith-based apparel, a pair of jeans, and some J's, because that's what I feel like I'm comfortable in. So as we talk about the duality of hood and holy, righteous and ratchet, I do believe that there are some things that we have quantified or that we have qualified as hood or ratchet that may not necessarily be. That just may be because I may be comfortable preaching in Jordans. Hey, truth be told, I didn't see my daddy preaching no shoes, and I think that socks. I just got to believe that Jordans are better than preaching in socks. That's just me personally. But what I'm saying is that we don't have to fit into a mold of what people feel like we ought to be or feel like we ought to. When I first got to I was assigned to a church, and I won't name that church because I love it dearly, and I still go there. But when I was first assigned to a church, not as a pastor, but just as a understudy, for lack of a better word. And I got to that church, and my pastor pulled me in one day, and she said, "Listen, some people came and asked me why you don't never sit in the pulpit."
Mm.
And I just kind of sort of bust out laughing. I just chuckled a little bit. And she said, "But I'm gonna tell you what I told them." Uh, she said, "Is he a reverend in the pulpit?" They said, "Yeah." "Is he a reverend in the congregation?" She said, "Yeah." "Well, what difference do it make where he sits?" Because oftentimes when I come to people's church, number one, I don't want to be recognized. Number two, I'm going to sit in the back. I'm going to come late, and I'm probably going to leave early because if I came to visit your church, I only came because a particular person invited me. I usually don't go away from home on Sunday mornings. That's just something that my mama taught me, which was something that her mama taught her. So, with that being the case, the only thing that I'm saying is that we have created a mold or a blocked in how we feel like our preachers ought to look, our preachers, ministry people ought to look, and Christians too, how we ought to look, how we ought to dress. Now, let me just say this. I do believe that there are some things that are very much so influential. And my dad and I have this conversation all the time because Dr. Clariot started with talking about music. And one of the things that she said is that when she started developing this relationship, she had to eliminate those things that were not gospel music. Well, the truth be told, some of the gospel music we really need to eliminate too, because it really ain't gospel.
My
My
Lord.
Lord.
And it ain't.
But
And it ain't.
but if we're going to, and I heard a preacher say it this way, some of the stuff that we sing, it ain't church music for real. But the reality of it is that this is where I tell people I do this at work. When I first get to work, I turn on my Pandora station and I have it on some form of worship music, whether it's a quartet or Mississippi Mass, or I even do Maverick City Music and some of those other groups similar to them. But up until lunchtime, that's what it's going to be. Now, around 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30, I might switch over to a Kim or I might switch over to something a little bit more mellow. as my day goes along, because I think that the music is what I'm listening to. But here's what she said that's very important. She said when she started her relationship, she had to cut that stuff off. And the reason, probably, and I'm just guessing here, that she had to cut those things off is because they were a part of a person who she was trying to grow through or grow from. And so, oftentimes, when we allow those things to continue to feed into our mental state or feed into our thoughts, it's so hard to get some level of progression. But when she was able to sift through what was good and what was bad, because now she's no longer, in the terms that she used, now that she's no longer a babe in Christ, she's able to sift through and see what's good and see what's bad. And as the old folk used to say, chew up the meat and spit out the bone. She's able to do that now, whereas when she was younger in developing that relationship, it was a little bit more complex. And I do believe that at some point in our relationship, because we're always ever growing if we continue to, if we're studying, if we're reading, if we're praying, if we're in relationship with God, we're always going to be growing until you die. That's when you cease to grow, spiritually at least. And so, with that being the case, I do believe that it may be beneficial for somebody who is developing that relationship to eliminate those outside things. But at some point, you should be able, as I said, to sift through what's good and sift through what's bad and be able to control the things that you allow into your space.
Preacher Tim,
Yeah,
you
and
want to comment?
one of the things I wanted to say is to, I think that going back to something that Micah said is that, it's dangerous to try to be somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do that, it's two people that you're not being. You're not being yourself, and you're not being whoever it is you're trying to be either. So, and when I think about ministry, even growing up in the church, that's one of the reasons why a lot of marriages fail, even in the preaching community. Because what happens is we have been told that this is what a preacher or a pastor is supposed to look like. This is what his family is supposed to look like. This is what his children is supposed to look like. All of these different things. And so what happens is what I've seen over the years is that what a lot of pastors end up doing is marrying who makes them look good and then cheating with who makes them happy.
Oh,
And
Lord Jesus.
Well,
and
you don't say it something then now.
Mm.
what happens is here's this woman that has been groomed since a child how to look and act and dress and be like a preacher's wife. And so, like, I marry her because she looks good for ministry. She looks good for business. But deep down, they're knowing this ain't really who I want. The woman that I really want is somebody that the church probably wouldn't accept because she don't walk like or talk like or dress like or act like what everybody's definition of a preacher's wife is supposed to be. So then they turn around and marry the one that's more polished, but then all the time you cheating with the woman that you really want.
So
And
I got a question. Hold that real quick. Hold it. So when you want to love your woman and you want to love your ministry, and so if you pick the one that really make you happy, but because appearances obviously matter, what happens when your love of ministry declines because the church that you're trying to serve doesn't accept who you married? What you
well,
do with it?
if you
Do you
look at it,
walk away?
yes, because here's why. Because if you look at it biblically, the family was established before the church was.
Uh,
So
I
that,
just didn't
Preacher.
know what you was gonna say.
Preacher.
so that lets me know that, as a matter of fact, so much so that God says a man that don't take care of his family don't even need to preach or pastor. So with that, So with that being said, if you can't accept my family, then you can't accept me. So guess what? If you got a problem with who I'm with, then you got one or two choices. You can either act like you happy or you can die mad. But either one, it doesn't matter to me.
Cause,
So
who gonna whoop your tail?
Nobody. And guess what else? You and watch this. And here's the bigger kicker. I'm the one that's got to lay with this person every day and every night. I'm the one that's got to go home to this person every day. So any church that wants me to be unhappy so that I can look like their image of a pastor or a preacher, they don't love me anyway. And I don't want to pastor them type of people. Period.
You stay Baptist now, okay?
So with that being
Can
said,
can I
I'm gonna
just
be with it. I don't care
You
what they,
stay Baptist.
you know. But
You
I see it
what?
all the time.
Who are you breaking up bad?
Boy,
I
your
see
cricket is breaking up.
It's look, it's cricketing tonight. It's
no,
cricketing.
no. But you know what I
can
mean. But at
Hold
the
on, Michael.
end of the day, anybody that you look at, let's go back to love. Jesus loved who we all.
Bruh, hey Tim, we can't hear you, baby. We can't hear you. Up and there you go. Okay, Michael.
Dog.
I want to interject. I want to interject there and say
Uh-huh.
it's good that he brought that out about this family and God giving establishing the family before. It's that is so intricate, and I have two personal little tidbits that kind of sort of personify, if you will, what Tim brought out. The first being is at one point in time I was engaged, and she went to a traditional Baptist church, and people would always ask her, "Are you sure you want to be a first lady? You ready for what that looked like?" And blah 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 blah. Have conversation with her about that, and I was pastoring at the time, and every time she would come at or tell me that somebody said that to her, the first thing that I would say is, "Have they ever been a first lady? So how do they know what it takes?" But the second thing that I would always say to her is that as the spouse, because there's no such thing as a first lady, but as the spouse of a preacher, pastor, whatever, your responsibility is not to the people. Your responsibility is to your spouse. That's it. That's where your responsibility lies. Now, as far as the attire, and she had these tattoo on both shoulders, I believe. It might have been just one, but we'll just say it was both. Anywho, and so the very first time that she went to the church that I was pastoring at the time after our engagement, the very first time she went there, she had a dress that wasn't off the shoulder, but it did show a little piece of her tattoo. And she was like, "Well, I need to change because I thought this was going to be, a little bit more covered. I thought it was going to be covered. I thought it was." I was like, "Well, if you go change, we're going to be late." And she said, "Well, well, we can just be late." No, 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 no. We won't be late. You're fine. I said two things. Number one, if somebody says anything to you, the first thing that you tell them is, "I'm his fiance at that time. I'm his fiance first, not your pastor's wife or whatever, how you ever want to label it. My first responsibility is him. And if that don't work, tell him that he bought it for me and told me to wear it." So you have to start. The point that I'm making is, and even in some of these positions, is as pastors, preachers, and ministry workers, we have to start nipping some of the culture that has brought certain things like this into the church. We have to start nipping those things in the bud and start chipping away at it, because if we continue to enforce those, whatever we want to call them, bad habits, tradition, beliefs, whatever, if we continue to enforce those things, it'll continue to be go on and on and on. But those of us who believe that that's not what identify, or that's not who we become, simply because we have a calling or simply because we're Christian, then we tend to allow those things to happen. And when we allow those things to happen, we're no different. We believe those things, but if we're not vocal about what we believe in correcting what we believe to be bad behavior or bad ideas, then we ain't worth nothing either.
So
Is
that kind of brings what you gonna say, Tim?
no, and I was just gonna say, personal experience. Sometimes it's the chick with the jeans and the joints on throwing up GD that'll love you better than the chick with the long dress and the heels on. You feel and she'll stick by you, you know what I mean? And really, she gonna ride for you, you know. And I'm not saying that you gotta go and get like this ghetto boo or nothing like that, but what I'm saying is that sometimes we get so caught up in the look, in the image, that we lose sight of what's inside and what's the core of an individual. Just because some of the biggest crooks I know wear suits and ties.
Yes, Lord.
And I'm talking about the ones in church. I'm not talking about in the streets. I'm talking about in the church. You know what I mean? Some of the biggest crooks wear the suits and the ties and the church shoes every Sunday. So
Oh.
that means nothing to me. You know, and I had to learn to be me, even if I had to be me alone. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is, I knew that when I finally, and this is a very transparent moment right here for me to say this. I knew that when I finally decided to stop playing with God, I knew that I would have to walk alone in a lot of aspects. And the reason why I say playing with God is because when you're trying to be who everybody else thinks you should be, and all of this, what you're really doing is you're playing with God, because you're standing in church every week being somebody other than who he called you to be, and that's playing with God. And when I decided that I wanted to stop playing with God and really just be Tim, I knew that a lot of people wouldn't be able to embrace that, but I had to learn to be okay with it. And the moment that I decided to do that, the preaching opportunities decreased. And not as many people started calling me to come and preach at their church. But here's the beautiful thing that I learned even with that. A preaching engagement is not when I stand in the pulpit and open up a text and preach. A preaching engagement is every time I meet somebody that don't know Jesus and I have an opportunity to share with them the gospel of Christ, whether it's in Walmart, whether it's at Huey's, having a beer, or whatever it is I'm doing. That is a preaching engagement. And once I learned to be okay with the fact that everybody wasn't going to be able to swallow what I was pouring, the moment that I started to live and really stopped playing with God.
Okay, so having said that, and we've probably touched on this a little bit, I just want to hear more about it. Has righteousness and or religion just become ritualistic?
Become? No, it didn't become. It's been that. Like it's been a ritual. It's been that. It's been that ever since Massa and them made it that, and ever since they left the plantation and went up to Chicago and spent a few days in seminary and came back down south to preach. Like, it's been that way. It's like being institutionalized and placed in a box, and people do not reach their full potential. People don't even pick their Bibles up to read, simply because I'm gonna go to Bible study and pastor gonna teach and pastor said, and not even understanding and realizing the whole concept of the Bible and how the Bible should be properly interpreted. And we talked about this last week about how people have taken, the Bible and tried to westernize it so much. It's like y'all are missing how the Bible is supposed to really be interpreted. And people they're like in a box. Even for classic example, one of the biggest boxes that Christians put themselves in, and watch this, this is not for everybody. You got to be mature enough to eat and chew what I'm about to say. One of the biggest boxes that Christians put themselves in is thinking that tithing to the physical church is the only way they can tithe. That's the only way. And I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm not saying that you should not tithe to the church. What I am saying is you should have a relationship so game tight with God that you should be able to hear him when he's telling you to tithe in the grocery store and pay somebody's grocery bill. You should be able to hear God saying that you should be, paying it forward, paying somebody's light bill and things like that. Like, it's not just limited to the church, but again, you have to know your relationship with God. You have to know the season that you're in, and you have to know His voice. You have to seek Him for what it is that He wants for your life, so you can come outside of this box. And when I say coming outside of the box is one of the most liberating and beautiful things. And people tend to think, and I've heard this, if you come outside of the box or you're liberated, then, you one of these new age Christians and you on your way to hell. You the one who up there still preaching one thing, living some completely different. As Tim said earlier, you married to one person, but then you creeping along with who's making you happy, and you just, your sin just ain't on Front Street. Who you really are, you're hiding it so well. But when Thaddeus Matthew find out about you, and all the grits hit the fan, then it's y'all pray for me. No, I ain't praying for you. I ain't wasting my prayer on that. You just need to repent and get yourself together. So we can come outside of the box. Know God for yourself. Get the right relationship with yourself. This religion, and the best way I often tell people when they ask me, what's the difference between religion and relationship? Religion has a bunch of man-made bylaws telling you what you cannot do. Relationship with Jesus Christ tells you who you are and what He will empower you to do.
I'll say this, just to piggyback off of what she said. She talked about how it's been religious has been a lot. Religion has played a part, and she mentioned since Massa made it that way, and I go so far as to say that it's been that way longer than that. Um, if you look in Acts chapter 17, he said there's a verse in there where he says, "You are very religious, but you don't know God." That, I mean, in essence, they had built an altar that said to the unknown God. So they wanted to encompass any other God that there may be, even though they were declaring to believe in the God. And so, with that being the case, that's oftentimes what we see in our churches. We see people who are very religious, but have no concept of who God is, because God hasn't moved in their hearts. God has not touched it. I mean, and my dad and I have this conversation all the time, how we talk about how people are in the church and have been in the church all of their lives and never been saved, will die and go to hell. It is so unfortunate, but it's a harsh reality, because we have adapted to our religion to be what it to mean Christianity, and that's just really not the case. A lot of the thing, and I tell people, my former bishop, Bishop Jefferson Snorton, she would say all the time, "Y'all know we made this stuff up, right?" And the church was floored one time. I think she was preaching actually, and the whole building could hear a rat pee on cotton when she said, "Do you know that hoes need communion too?" And you're talking about an elected episcopate speaking in a sermon and saying, "You know that hoes need communion too." But the point that she was making is that all of these ritualistic things that we have made to be our faith were all man-made. They were all written by some man, maybe even some woman. But the point of it is that is not is not indicative of our faith. It is not who we are at the core essence of being Christian. And so when we allow religion and man-made rules and man-made doctrine and all of those things to dictate to us what we should do, how we should think, how we should dress, and how this whole narrative of women not wearing pants to church, where did it come from? But people think that is Christianity. I have a friend who, and I had a intense discussion about the apostolic faith and how they believe that women shouldn't wear pants to church. I'm like, well, where is that in the Bible? Where did y'all get that from? Y'all made that up. And so I would, again, just simply say that a lot of times when we guide our beliefs as Christians or guide our faith by things that some man wrote, some woman wrote, whatever the case may be, we're in trouble. Because then we have, like they say in Acts, you're very religious and you don't know God. You don't have the relationship with God because you don't know who He is, because you are too busy with all of the religiosity.
Tim.
Um, the question you asked was, has righteousness become ritualistic?
Yes.
One of the things that I would say to that is number one, and I hope that I don't offend anybody when I say this, but
Uh-oh.
I have to say it the only way I know how to say it.
Uh-oh.
Unfortunately, Christians are some of the most ignorant people on the planet. Now, listen to what I'm saying, because I'm not trying to be funny when I say that. The reason why I say that is because we're one of the only groups of people who do a lot of things that we can't even tell you why we do it.
My Lord.
We
Okay.
just do it
Okay.
because somebody else told us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do it because this is what grandmama and mama and all of those people said. But we never once say, let me go back and read for myself and see if this is what God really said. We just heard somebody older than us say it and we just go with it. In the Baptist church, there's a like an article of faith thing that some churches will recite. And one of the things that it says is, I vow to abstain from the use or sale of alcohol. And right when they get to that, I stop talking. See, because I'm not I'm not gonna recite that because that's not Bible. The Bible in Ephesians 5 and 18, and be not drunken with wine wherein it is excess, but be ye filled with the Spirit. He didn't tell me I had to abstain from it. He just told me don't overdo it. So therefore, I'm not finna say no anything just because this is what y'all been reciting for the past 150 years. That I don't care who wrote that. If it's and the sad part about it is, if you ask the average Christian, why do you do that? Why do you believe that? Why do y'all say that? Most of them can't give you nothing more than, well, my pastor said that, or my mama said that, or my grandmama said that. And to me, that's problematic because I can't get to heaven off of grandmama and granddaddy's religion. I have to get there on my own religion. And I know most of y'all that's on my Facebook page, y'all know I'm me, right? And I'm me everywhere I go, right, wrong, or indifferent. And one of the reasons why I'm that way is because this is what I always tell people. You can't undress somebody that's already naked.
My
See,
Lord.
see, I don't worry about people exposing me or I'm gonna tell people this and that or whatever. Because 9 times out of 10, what you're telling somebody about me is something that they already know. Because I've never lived my life trying to hide or pretend to be
Hush.
anything. And what, from my experience, I can't speak for nobody else, but from my experience, what it actually has done is it has caused a lot of, especially people in the unchurched community, to actually have more respect for me because they appreciate the fact that I can minister to them about Jesus and still fully embrace who I am as a because most people from the streets can smell a fake from a mile away, and
Mm.
they know when you coming to them with some bull because part of being able to maneuver in the streets is being, people don't even realize hood people got more discernment than church folk because most hood cats, they have to be able to see, I don't trust this cat right here, something about this cat ain't right, so because in order to navigate through the streets quote unquote successfully, you have to be able to have that discerning spirit of who you dealing with. So when you come to them with all these big words and trying to be cute and this, that, and the third, man, them folks smell that stuff from a mile away and gon' dismiss you and don't have no problem with it. But when you come before them real and you like, man, this is who I am, bro. Like, this is what I got going on. You stand a better chance of them people listening to you and accepting God working through you than being somebody else.
Mm-hmm. I feel like people should always know why you need Jesus, you know? Um, but sometimes we can spend so much time trying to be perfect, making it seem like we don't do no wrong and all this stuff. And I tell people all the time, you can talk to me in one conversation and you gonna know why I need Jesus. Okay. You gonna know I will never say a curse word because I don't curse. But I can put some words together that are so just my Lord. You gonna wish I had just went on and put the 4 or 5 cuss words in there. But you're gonna know, and I tell people this all the time, like I am going to be who I'm going to be. I will either draw or I will drive. There is no in between. I have yet to meet somebody who I think I like her. I don't know. You either going to be in love with me or you going to hate the sight of me coming. There's no in between. And the thing about it is, like Tia mentioned, people know when you're authentic. People know when you're real. They can see through the bull. When you standing up there taking up that offering, talking about some God told me to petition the people today and all, just stop all the foolishness. If you cut all that out and just go and say, y'all, the light bill need to be paid and we shout. Okay. And truth be told, if God's favor is resting on the house, you ain't got to never ask the congregation for nothing. And that's something I stand firm on. And I'm telling y'all, when I do become somebody's pastor, that is something I am going to practice and stand firm on because it's in my private life to this day. And I don't boast and brag as if, I'm just whatever, but I have never been in a bind. And I actually had to borrow or ask somebody to pay a bill. I never had to do that. And it's simply because my heart has been in right relationship with God from the day I established my relationship with him. I haven't been perfect. But I'm not out here scheming, scamming, lying to people. Always folks operate off of these hidden agendas and motives. And you thinking, like Tim said, church people and Christians can be some of the most ignorant people. And ignorance simply means not knowing. And when you don't know, people will play on that. And when they take the time to play on that and take advantage of gullible people, that's why the house is not in order. That's why y'all can't pay the light bill at the church, because the head is not in order. The head is scheming and scamming and doing things that it just should not be doing. And that's where the issue comes in at. But when you actually know God for yourself, and even as ministers, when we know God for ourselves, like we have to just live a flat out, straight, truthful lifestyle. Like, this is who I am. You're going to know why I need him. Every single day, you're going to know why I need him. I just had a situation in Walmart this afternoon. I'm walking in minding my business. This man just came up behind me with this little move around thing, talking about what stupid person stops in the middle of the aisle. And baby, when I say, it was quick. And that's when I said, Lord, I need you. I really do. I mean, the good thing is I did not snatch that man up, but I know I need you. But I can't sit up here and act like, even as a minister and somebody who's well educated, that I don't have my moments. Yes, I do have my moments. And I have to recollect myself and get myself together. But, like I said, when we spend so much time lying and living a lie, we can't even get on track to becoming who God wants us to be.
I say this. Um, my dad and I have these conversations all the time, and we sometimes we differ in the thought process of where we stand. However, the thing that I always keep in my mind is the old hymn that says, a charge to keep I have, so on and so forth. And then it gets to the part that says, to serve this present age. And that is so, that to me, that is the most important line in the whole entire
So,
song.
mhm.
Because if, as a preacher, I'm still trying to fit the mold of the preacher from 1946,
My Lord.
I'm not
Mm,
serving this present age.
mm-mm.
If,
Mm.
as a pastor, I'm still preaching the same old rank, stale sermons that were being preached by people back in the and here's we're not dealing with real issues because it's not quote unquote safe. We're not talking about how, because we want to fit the mold, right? We want to be what, and that's just not. And let me tell y'all something. This Tim talked about transparent moment. Let me give you a transparent moment. I was fired from my last church, okay, Methodist church, and I say I was fired because there was just too much devil involved in that scenario. But I was fired from my last church for trying to do ministry. And the reality of it is, instead of conforming to the system, because my bishop said, and I'm just going to be real, my bishop said to me, well, I need to let that go, leave it alone. It's their church. I need this. I got to follow this rule, that policy. Instead of conforming to that system, I, I, I accepted my fate of being removed as their pastor because I knew it was inevitable. I knew it was going to happen. I knew because I wasn't going to. And let me just say this really quickly. I talked to a buddy of mine the other day, and I was telling him about my experience in the Methodist church. I ain't gonna specifically speak no names, but in the Methodist church, and I told my friend, I said, I'm gonna write this article, this paper. I'm gonna write it, and it's going to be called "I Have Decided to Drown."
Mm.
It plays on a couple of different things, but the majority thing that it plays on is the fact that when we decide to push back those systems of religiosity, those systems of everything church culture, then you signed a death note as a preacher. You can. But the thing of it is whether I don't get appointed to another church, whether no bishop wants anything to do with me, whether I get elected to a connectional position or post, whether I get to preach in these churches or these traditions, I've decided to drown. It's okay. I'm okay with my fate because at the end of the day, the person who I have to be held accountable to does not wear a purple shirt, does not wear a red shirt, doesn't drive a Cadillac, doesn't live in this fancy house that they wouldn't be able to afford if they didn't have the position in the first place.
Mm.
My accountability comes from God. And so, with that being the case, I can't allow myself to conform to a system simply because they say that's how it's supposed to be. And the truth of the matter is those who have conformed have eventually found out that it don't work for them in the long run. Because eventually, there's going to be a new sheriff in town who may not deal with you the same way that the old person did. So instead of changing who you are, be yourself and allow God to put you in places and to send you to places where he can have you where you are. And like she said, I'm not bragging, I'm not. But after I was fired, 2 days later, I started the process of launching a nonprofit organization. In 1 year and a half now of nonprofit status, I have done more ministry, raised more money, and helped more people than I have done in 10 years complete in ministry.
Mm.
And that's because when we allow God to order our steps and be genuine in who He has called us to be, you go in spaces that He opens doors that you never thought would be open. He makes opportunities where you didn't think that there would, that you don't even meet the qualifications for in the first place. I don't know what it takes to be an executive director of a nonprofit, but heck, I think I'm doing pretty good. I don't have all the formal education and all of those things, but what I do have is people around me who sow a seed here, and it's not necessarily money, but knowledge. It's not necessarily time or money, but experience. It's not necessarily money, but time. As you said, tithing goes beyond your local church or where you call yourself going to be a member of. So the point that I'm making through all of this is when you are yourself, God creates and open doors and creates spaces for you to be in where you can exercise your gift genuinely instead of conforming into some system that they say that you're supposed to be a part of.
All right. I'm gonna ask this last question as we wrap up, and I only want a yes or no because your answers will bleed into the religion versus relationship conversation that we're gonna have. Has the church actually demonized the act of serving this present age? Yes or no? Tim,
Yes.
Micah,
Yes.
and I know you want to say something else I can hear, but I want you to hold it. Doctor. Doctor.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. We thank y'all so much. Y'all join us in probably about 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to take a break for relationship versus religion. This has been You, Me, and the Trinity's Christ Connections and Conversations. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Be blessed.
Peace.